Well, as promised, and coming to you from relative exile here in the middle of Kansas, in a sort of shelter in place type of mode, um, I wanted to bring you a discussion that's based off of a couple of works that I've been reading lately: The Green State and the Desert Manifesto, or just Desert. And I want to tell you a little bit about all of that today. But first, I wanted to kind of address why I'm covering these two works and why now. And I guess the why now is pretty easy for me to answer. Right now, as we all know, we are living through a period of deep instability in our economic system, our political system, and out of that comes many possibilities, many of which we can only begin to glimpse or imagine. Much of it is unknown. But we do know that when societies face major challenges like this, that we're likely to see exposed both the strengths and the weaknesses of state power to handle these types of situations. And we're going to see opportunities, both for good and for bad, come out of chaotic situations like this. I think the situation with the coronavirus also exposes more deeply the social, political, economic, and environmental implications of the system of large states that are integrated into a transnational and globalized economy. So this is a time which is scary, but it is also a time in which we are called to reflect and to think systematically and deeply, and not allow ourselves to simply be in a paralysis or in a state of panic. It's very important now for people to try to assess not only what's going on in the moment, but what this may mean for our future, and to think not only in terms of catastrophe, but openings. So Robyn Eckersley's book, The Green State, is a book that promotes the advantages of the state. Robyn Eckersley is a professor of political science at the University of Melbourne. And her previous book was Environmentalism and Political Theory, an Ecocentric Approach. That was done in 1992. And then this book was from 2004, The Green State, Rethinking Democracy and Sovereignty. So this is one of the works that I've been reading lately. And the other one is, it's anonymous. We don't know who the author is. It's on the Anarchist library website, so anybody can find it, and I will put the link below for that, as well as Eckersley's book. This is a single authored piece. At least it's representing itself as a single authored piece, because at the very beginning of the work, the term I is used, and he or she calls himself a nature-loving anarchist. Okay, and says that he's addressing other anarchists who have high ideals, or maybe another way to put that would be anarchists who have very high aspirations for anarchy. Anarchy, just as a reminder, does not mean, or at least doesn't necessarily mean, the promotion of chaos. It simply means without state or overarching power. And the type of anarchism that I'm going to be talking about through a discussion of this work has to do with the idea of mutual aid at a lower level, at a non-state level, that is voluntary. Okay, so hopefully that will help a little bit. Big questions come out of a dialogue like this between an author like Eckersley, who sees the state as as really the only hope we've got to make the changes we need to make in our emissions and so on, and an anarchist who is very suspicious of the state, But one question that they have, that these two books bring up and that they have in common, is should we retain absolute goals in our way of thinking? Okay. Now it's really clear with the Anarchist that he basically thinks that a lot of anarchists have had this absolute goal of, we have to have like a worldwide global revolution against state power and the institution of anarchist societies everywhere. Some anarchists are more leftist, others are more in the right or libertarian type anarchist direction. But this author points out that many of them have retained this kind of Enlightenment obsession with the absolute goal. And this author no longer believes in that clearly. So he makes the case that anarchists need to stop thinking about those absolute goals, or they won't be able to see their opportunities where they lie. For Eckersley, there's questioning as well. There's more of an absolutist frame of mind in Eckersley's work, and it's not just because she is an advocate for the state, but also because she's thinking that only the state can bring about these transnational goods. Like there has to be a lot of cooperation amongst countries, and there are already transnational institutions like the United Nations in place that can help us move towards a greener global transnational situation. But still, Eckersley is cognizant of the argument that states have done much harm, or states are suspect. And she says that oftentimes people who lean in the green direction are suspicious of states because they have done a lot of harm and promoted a lot of the very environmental the things that cause environmental harm, such as multinational corporations. So anyway, that's one question. Should we retain these absolute goals, or should we let go of absolute goals or universal goals and maybe look at where we can see opportunities where they may lie? People love to think in terms of absolutes because they feel like if they let go of the absolutes, they're letting go of hope. But it's kind of a cool part of the Desert Manifesto that you feel a great sense of hope when reading it at the very same time that the author is letting go of these grand visions that anarchists have held in the past. So a second question that kind of comes out of the first one for me is the choice between state and mutual aid absolute? In other words, do we have to choose between state power or mutual aid, the type of power, so to speak, that the anarchist approves of, where individuals freely, give aid to each other and form voluntary communities? Are those exclusive, mutually exclusive choices? Eckersley's position is, as I said, that the state is necessary for achieving some goods, especially national and international action to stem emissions. But I don't think that she would say that means that we shouldn't form community and strong community where we can. In fact, in her book, she talks a lot about democracy building. And, it's not clear at what level she's necessarily talking about, but maybe at every level, Eckersley wants people to go into their deliberative situations with a sense of the common good. And she even argues that sense of common good has to include advocacy for the parts of the world that can't speak for themselves, the plants and the animals and the air and the water and so on. So Eckersley is very interested in developing what we might call strong democracy as opposed to liberal democracy. Liberal democracy creates factions and sees factions as good, right? It tends to focus on the individual and individuals being driven by self-interest to promote their faction in a sort of battle with others. Whereas the deliberative democratic view is that if people come into a deliberative situation, meaning they're going to go and they're going to talk about, what should happen, what they should support, the changes that they want. if they go into that situation with the right frame of mind, not the liberal frame of mind, but a community frame of mind, in which they understand that everybody's interest is tied up with every other's interest, including the nonverbal part of the world, then they'll have a different attitude, and the outcome is likely to be different. So that's Eckersley's view. And to me, that means that Eckersley, even somebody like Eckersley, who is very much trying to make a case for retaining hope in the state and its use of power to solve problems, even she is not going to argue that community building is a waste of time. In fact, she seems to be arguing that the two go together. Okay, she would never go as far as a true anarchist and say that lower level of community building should separate itself ideally from the state, and that the state should at least ideally go away. Okay, now in the Desert Manifesto, there's a big theme at the beginning drawn out about the effects of climate change, and this author wants to make it abundantly clear that he thinks that climate change is well underway, and that it's creating things in our environment that are going to force, for instance, massive migrations, right? As people are unable to make a living or eke out an existence in certain areas, fleeing to others. And that there's going to be all sorts of fissures in power structures and in the economy. There is, because of this, in his view, going to be an inevitable decline in state power. But that doesn't mean that states are going to go away. In some places of the world, they're going to be stronger and they're going to be able to hang on to power. In other places, they'll disintegrate entirely, and in other places, there will be a mix of the two. And whenever there's a mix or disintegration, in this author's view, then there's an opportunity for a new type of community to arise that is based on anarchist principles. Okay, so again, there's not a complete 100% disagreement between these two authors, and that says to me that Desert is probably right, that there is no absolute choice that people have to make between the state and mutual aid. But one will be emphasized over the other. So at a personal level, this leads me to a question which has already been on my mind a lot, which is, where should our energies go at this point in time? Where should my energy go? Everybody has a limited amount of time and energy, both mental and physical, to spend on politics broadly construed, just meaning how we relate and manage our affairs with other people. Is it better, if we are so inclined to try to change the world in a positive direction, to participate in politics in the classic sense, all right, meaning, going to the town hall meeting or supporting a local legislator or candidate, canvassing, of course, voting and all of that. In other words, participating in our political system. Or should we put more of our attention where the anarchist would like it, which is in local, nonpartisan community building, which at least Desert feels as though that can happen within the overarching framework of state power. Okay, especially as the state power becomes overwhelmed and can't deal with everything, community building can happen rather undisturbed or unmolested. So that's the question for me. And I don't have an answer yet. I am very attracted to the idea of local community building, and I actually think it's a political act of sorts to build strong local communities. And I don't mean partisan communities that are mainly built around justice-type activities that really get organizations back into politics. I mean people actually forming communities where they help each other. In my mind, it's a political act, because basically, number one, you're saying I don't absolutely rely upon the state or corporate power for my well-being, even though we have to for quite a bit. Also, it's a way of experiencing your own power, not to be represented, but to actually represent yourself and your intentions relative to other human beings. So I'm very attracted to that, but at the same time, I'm very persuaded by Eckersley's view that the state is still here, that its actions matter, that they matter a lot. They've done both a lot of harm as well as a lot of good in our world, and we're not going to get rid of the state anytime soon, and I'm not sure we should want to, because usually in the wake of state collapse comes not the good kind of anarchy, but the chaos kind of anarchy. Okay? That being said, where should my energies go? I'm leaning towards the local, but only because I feel like I can have more impact there. But I will not be abandoning the higher political level right away. At this moment in time, with everything that's going on in our world, I guess I would urge everybody to think about what they can do in their own neighborhood, their family, their friends, the people right around them, to make people safer, to make sure they're supplied. At the same time, think about what's going on at the national and state level and how well our governments are performing under this, what I called last time as a stress test. Okay? Too early to have any answers, right? But let's observe this situation at multiple levels. I hope everybody is well, and I will be back next week, if not sooner, with another video in which I'll go into, probably what my plan is to just go into these questions more deeply and get into the texts a bit. All right, see you next time. Bye.